Okay, so you know how sometimes we find these sources that are like, whoa, what even? And we just got to like dive in, right?
Yeah, totally.
Today's one of those days. Buckle up, folks. We're going deep on a YouTube video.
Deep dive.
It's called Untold Truth About African Americans. You are not from Africa, nor are you an African.
Hmm.
Yeah, you heard that right. It's by Dane Calloway, and let's just say he's got some thoughts.
Yeah, I'm sensing a challenge to the mainstream narrative here.
Big time. So our mission today is to break down his claims, see what he's basing them on, and of course, as always, we want you listening out there to think critically about everything we're talking about.
Absolutely. Critical thinking is key when you're dealing with history, and especially when someone's presenting an alternative viewpoint.
Right on.
Yeah.
So Calloway starts off talking about Malcolm X, and he brings up this metaphor of a rock that landed on African Americans,
A rock, huh?
like something heavy and sudden. He claims after Malcolm X traveled abroad, he started suggesting that African Americans might actually be indigenous to the Americas, like they were already here.
Interesting. So what do you think this rock metaphor is all about?
Well, it's definitely open to interpretation, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But it makes me think of like a hidden truth coming to light. Maybe something that was buried for a long time.
Oh, I like that. Like maybe the rock symbolizes oppression or a truth that's been ignored.
Ooh, maybe even a literal event. Who knows?
I mean, think about it. What if he's implying that African Americans' real history has been covered up or something?
Whoa. Now that's a thought, listener.
Right.
What comes to mind when you hear rock in this context?
Yeah, we want to hear from you.
Okay, moving on. Calloway then jumps to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Okay.
He grabs this phrase, exile in his own land, from King's famous I Have a Dream speech.
Right, I remember that line.
And Calloway seems to think this hints at some kind of pre-existing connection to America, like as if African Americans were here before slavery.
That's a stretch, but okay.
So do you think that's what King meant?
Well, it's crucial to consider this historical context, right?
Of course.
King was fighting for equality and justice, an end to segregation. So exile in that context probably refers more to the racism and discrimination that made African Americans feel like outsiders in their own country, even though they were born and raised here.
Right, like a feeling of not belonging rather than a literal exile. Makes sense.
Yeah.
But then buckle up, because Calloway throws a major curveball. He calls it the reverse slave trade theory.
Reverse slave trade. Okay, I'm listening.
Basically, he flips the whole transatlantic slave trade narrative on its head.
Wow.
He says it was actually Native Americans, not Africans, who were shipped to Europe and then Africa as slaves.
Hold on now. That's a pretty bold claim.
It's a huge claim.
Like, imagine the evidence you'd need to back that up.
Right.
We'd be talking about manifests historical records, firsthand accounts from both sides of the Atlantic.
Mountains of proof.
Exactly. And while there's definitely documented evidence of Native American enslavement,
For sure.
especially in the Americas, it doesn't really support the idea of this large-scale systematic trade to Africa that Calloway's proposing.
Yeah, the scale just seems way off.
Right. The evidence just isn't there.
Then he brings up the American Colonization Society.
Yeah. The one that sent free African Americans to Liberia in the 1800s.
Right. You think he's trying to use that as evidence for his theory?
Well, the American Colonization Society is complicated.
Definitely.
They did relocate free Black people to Africa, but their motives were kind of all over the place.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, you had racism, paternalism, and some even argue a misguided attempt at helping by sending them back to Africa.
Yikes.
It was a dark chapter in American history, for sure. And a lot of African Americans resisted the idea. They saw America as their home.
Absolutely. Makes you think about how complex this whole question of origins and identity really is.
Yeah, it's deep.
Then Calloway throws out another interesting tidbit. He claims the term African American was adopted in 1988 against the wishes of most Black people.
I hadn't heard that.
Me neither.
Well, the way we use terms and labels is always evolving, right?
True.
African American did become more common in the late 20th century, but it wasn't like it was forced on anyone.
I guess not.
It more reflects a growing desire to recognize both African heritage and American identity at the same time.
Like a hyphenated identity.
Exactly.
Makes you think about how these labels can shape our understanding of ourselves and others.
For sure.
Finally, Calloway talks about the destruction of Native American culture.
Yeah.
He calls it a shameful part of history that's often swept under the rug.
And you know what? He's not wrong.
No, he's not.
Acknowledging this tragic history is so important.
It's crucial.
Erasing history hurts communities, and understanding the past helps us understand the present.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So wow, we've gone down a serious rabbit hole with Calloway today.
We have, haven't we?
He throws out some really thought-provoking stuff. Some of it more believable than others.
For sure. But that's the thing about history, right? It can be interpreted in so many different ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So listener, we got to ask you, how can we be sure we're getting the whole story? What's our responsibility to question the narratives we've been given and look for different perspectives?
What other untold truths might be out there, just waiting to be uncovered?
Food for thought, folks. Until next time.
Keep thinking critically.